is the CEO of Within Leadership in Tampa, Florida, where she delivers results through customized training and coaching programs. Please welcome to the ESA main stage, Jennifer Currens.
All right, welcome and congratulations. So we're nearing the end of this conference, the Leadership Conference, celebrating amazing leaders on stage. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to examine your own leadership. So let me ask you a question. You start off with, why are you here? How will you know that this conference has been worth your time and effort and money to be here? Share with me. What do you think? Takeaways. What kind of takeaways? What are you looking for?
How to grow your business, hire people,
Grow your business, hire people, be a better leader. Great. Thank you. What else? It is a leadership conference after all. What else? Why are you here? What's your ROI? Talking about growing your business. What's your ROI? How will you know that this has been successful?
Connect with others.
Connecting with others. Yes. Being able to build that camaraderie with other individuals and build your network, which also makes us stronger leaders, right? So if we want to become stronger leaders, sometimes we have to do the ugly chore of giving ourselves a really hard, ugly look in the mirror. And so I'm going to invite you all to join me today in taking a look at ourselves. Brené Brown says that who we are is how we lead. So I'm going to invite each one of us an opportunity to take a look at who we are. I'm going to give you some tools to do that so that each one of you, no matter what your position in your organization, can become a stronger leader within your organization, within your family, within your community, and be able to build on that. So what we're talking about is emotional intelligence, often referred to as emotional intelligence. What this is simply is the opportunity to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, and also to recognize and understand, and this is a key leadership word here, influence the emotions of others. So we can't make somebody else do anything, right? Anybody have any teenage children here? Current or previous, right? We can't make people do anything, but we can influence people. And here's the key. It all starts with us. What's the value of EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence, referring to them as the same thing here today? So if you take a list of individuals who are top performers and you compare them with some of the traits of individuals who are not top performers, you look at that gap, that difference there, and 80% of those traits have something to do with emotional intelligence. And I'm going to explain a little bit more to you neuroscientifically in a moment. It's really a key element to success in performing at any stage in the game and is worth more than your IQ and your technical skills combined. So that's why it's important. And you guys know this if you stop and think about it, right? We all understand that it doesn't matter necessarily what you know, it's who you know, networking, right? It's how you're able to communicate with somebody to influence them. These are all elements of emotional intelligence. So as a consultant, I like to work in 2x2 grids, right? So we're looking at emotional intelligence. It's really 4 elements here. So we have the self-awareness piece. Once we establish the self-awareness piece, we're able to move into self-management and social awareness or others awareness. And then once we are able to master those, then we're able to get to the real crux of the information, which we really want to do as leaders, which is managing those relationships that we have with other people, whether it's our business, our family, or our community. If you look at these, you can think of them as the top row is ourselves, and then the bottom row is focusing on others. All right, I'm going to give you 3 tools that you can use for the first step, building our self-awareness. So we're looking in the mirror here. Step 1, understand your own personal strengths and weaknesses. So as we're building our business, anybody do a SWOT analysis on their business? Right? Strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. We do it for our business. Why not do it for our teams or even for ourselves? What are my strengths? What are some areas of I don't like weaknesses. What are some areas of opportunities or areas for development that I can embark on? What external opportunities exist for me? Maybe some career development, growth that I could embark upon. And then what kind of external threats or roadblocks or obstacles exist out there that I need to be aware of? And once we're aware of them, we are better equipped to overcome them. So try that. You can do your own self-SWOT. Next one is to know your triggers. So how you do that? You identify your core values. In the previous session, the breakout session, we had a hearty discussion on core values and why they're important for our companies. But what about your core values? How do you know what's important to you? What are the things that you live and die by? And why is this important for you? Because once you understand the things that are valued to you, you're better able to understand why you react in certain ways. So one of my triggers, I'm not giving you any information that I haven't already done myself, right? So one of the things that I've realized about myself that I get triggered when somebody says to me, "You need to do this." I'm like, you don't get to tell me what I need to do. And so I'm wondering, why is that such a trigger for me? And I stopped to really examine my core values, and I realized that one of my core values is freedom and independence. And so when somebody tells me that I need to do something, then I feel like they are encroaching upon my level of freedom or independence. Makes sense, right? So why is that important? Because now I can take that information and I can understand why it's triggering me, and I can let it go. Now I don't have to be upset about this person who is telling me I need to do something. Now I can say, oh, this is why it's upsetting me. Okay, I can move on. And it allows me to give them a little bit of grace, which we could all use a little bit more of in this world today. Be able to provide and offer a little bit more grace and forgiveness to the other individual. Let me pause there for a second. Think about the individuals in your organization. We are businesses full of people, right? And what are some of the biggest issues, some of the biggest challenges you have in your organization? Sorry? Communication, which requires people, right? Yes, communication is a huge one because we all have different styles of communication. We all have different experiences. We're coming from different viewpoints, some different vantage points. And if we are not able to adequately communicate with each other, then we're going to get frustrated. And then, as a leader in your organization, you have people coming to you and saying, oh my gosh, I was just reading an email back there while I was waiting to get on stage. This person is telling me that they're saying that I have an agenda and that I am doing, all of these things and I'm being sneaky and I just don't think that that's fair and this has got to stop. This was the tone of their email, right? And then, of course, they have to forward their documentation of their text messages to me. So what do you do with that? Well, he's obviously being triggered by this person, so because he's trying to establish himself. She's feeling like she's not being communicated with, and that's her viewpoint. So really being able to understand what our values are and how we can all understand each other. So I know that if somebody tells me, hey, you need to do this, and I get mad at that person for telling me I need to do something, I don't hold it against this person now because I understand that that's a me issue, and I understand where it comes from, and I can move on and move past it. That's the benefit of self-awareness. The third thing is to know your blind spots. So you might say, I don't have any blind spots. Well, we all do. That's why they're called blind spots. We don't know about them. We don't understand what they are until we really stop and take a moment to examine those. Now, how are you going to know what your blind spots are? Because they're blind. You ask for feedback. So here's a challenge for you. I challenge you to go and you can text or ask 5 to 10 people. I call them loving critics, people you know and trust that are going to tell you the truth, no matter how much it hurts, and ask them 2 questions. Number 1, describe me when I'm at my best. Describe me when I'm at my best. And the second question, describe me when I'm not really at my best. You could say worst, depending on your relationship with the person. Describe me when I'm at my worst, or when I'm not my best self. What do I look like then? And interestingly, you will be able to see some of those traits for yourself. So you'll know what you can continue doing, and maybe some of those things that you can stop doing. So me and a group of my girlfriends did this, and you know what they told me? Jen, the best part about you is that you're so nice. Sweet, yes, I like to consider myself nice, kind, all of those things. And then I said, okay, so what's the worst part about me? Who am I when I'm not my best self? I said, honestly, Jen, it's because you're so nice. So it's interesting that sometimes our greatest strength can also show up as our greatest weakness. Now, since that day, which was about probably 4 years ago, sitting on the beach with a bottle of wine, because I live in Florida, so we can do that. We were able to really, I was able to really focus in on myself and examine how me being nice was detrimental to not only myself, but to the people who I was trying to lead. And in this case, as a single mother, the 2 most important people that I was trying to lead were my children, right? So emotional intelligence is a wonderful thing to study because it affects not only your business, but also your family relationships. It really incorporates all of the different aspects and connections that we make with individuals. So I challenge you to take these 3 tips and build your self-awareness. Find out a little bit more who you are. It doesn't matter how long you've been on this earth, but it'll be surprising to kind of dig in and learn a little bit more about yourself. Okay, so it's one thing to understand who you are. A lot of times people will say, that's who I am. That's just who I am. They're going to have to deal with me. I'm the boss. This is who I am. They're just going to have to deal with it. You don't like it, you can leave, right? Fair to say, but that's really not being very self-aware or self-managed. It's being self-aware. It's not being self-managed. So if we want to go to the next step and really be that leader to build into the other areas of emotional intelligence, self-management, others awareness, and relationship management, then we need to be able to start by managing ourselves. Sometimes can be as simple as a filter of what we're talking about. Let me explain to you how the brain works. So I am not a neuroscientist. I do not play one on TV, but I do play one on stage for a few moments. So we have our brain. Now, anytime we receive anything, any type of information, whether it's by touch or by sight or by sound, it comes in through our brainstem. And then its first stop is right here at the back of the brain. It's called the limbic system. Seth Godin calls it our lizard brain. It's where technically it's called our amygdala. This is where our emotions sit. And then, after it gets through the emotion section of our brain, it has to travel to the rational part of our brain. This is our prefrontal cortex, and this is where all of our thinking happens. So, have you ever been in a situation where something happens to you and you react with anger or with delight or with some sort of a strong emotion? Now you know why. It's a biological fact that it has to go through the emotion piece of your brain before it gets to the thinking part of your brain. So emotional intelligence is the wonderful skill to be able to manage our emotions so that thought can get from the emotion piece to the rational piece, and we're able to pause and take a moment. So now we can work with the information intelligently. Sometimes, some of you might say, let me sleep on that. Something that really got in your crawl yesterday, now the next morning after a good night's sleep, it's like, oh, I don't understand why I was really that upset about it. I feel much better about it today. It's okay. Now we know why, because you've been able to think about it rationally. Now, you might say, okay, that's good, but I've been this way for a long time, and that's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. But we can teach an old dog new tricks. This is called neuroplasticity, and it's brand new evidence in the neuroscience world that's come about in the past decade. In the past 10 years, they're learning so much more about the way that our brains operate. And what we do is we create these habits in our brain. These strong pathways are these habits. And when we start to do something new, it's a weak pathway. And the thing is the more we follow that weak pathway, the more clearly defined that becomes. Pretty soon, the weak pathway becomes a strong pathway, and we've created a new habit. So Michelle was telling me earlier, it's like taking a machete through a cornfield, right? It's a lot of hard work. It takes what I call patient persistence, but it can be done. We can retrain our brains with intentional, repeated tasks. So a lot of times what I see in the workplace is we're trying to teach somebody something new, and they're like, that's too much work. I can't do that. I tried today. I went and I tried to have this conversation with this individual, and she wasn't listening to me. Okay, that was one time. It's going to take a lot more instances in order to develop that new pathway in the brain. So I'm completely fascinated by neuroscience and some of the neuroplasticity that's coming along nowadays. I'm a big bookworm, so if anybody's interested in reading about it, just let me know, and I'll share some of my favorite books with you. But moving on for the case of emotional intelligence. We understand who we are. We have self-awareness. We understand that we need to kind of take some breaths to be able to manage when we get those trigger points or when we get those blind spots, be able to think through them. So how do you do that? What is your way to manage your emotions? How do you do this? Think for a moment. Some of the key ways that I've seen when I've talked to other people is they take a breath. So if you have an Apple Watch, there's a little tool on there. You can just click it and it reminds you to breathe, right, for 1 minute. And sometimes it's hard to find 1 minute out of our day to take time to breathe, right? But it's powerful. I learned about the power of breath from one of my friends who was deployed to Afghanistan. He was in the National Guard for 20 years. He was deployed to Afghanistan, and he told me that he was taught to do 4-box breathing. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out, breathe out for 4, and hold for 4. He called it 4-box breathing. They were taught that in the U.S. Army before they pulled the trigger. And it really does slow your heart rate down and provide you from that emotional response to get to that thinking point. So it's a little bit of an extreme example, but it's good enough for the U.S. military. We could try it in our business. We can borrow so many things from the military anyway. So many wonderful, wonderful tools. If you want to do a little experiment on your own, I've done this before because I was curious. I'm like, really? Breathing reduces your heart rate? That sounds so simple. So next time you're at the gym, or here they have a gym here, right? Go onto the treadmill and just walk for a while. Get your heart rate up a little bit. And then hold on to the little heart rate monitors that they have on the treadmill machine or on the bike or whatever you're on, and see what the number is, and then take a deep breath, like a really deep breath. And you'll see your number will decrease. By 2 or 3 or 4 points, your heart rate will decrease. So breathe, that deep breath really can calm you down. All right. So some other things you can do. Take a walk, do some exercise. How do you manage your emotions when you get triggered? Pet a dog. How many of you have dogs at work? Oh, I had a bunch of people raise their hand and then it went down. You do have some dogs at work. Yeah. I hope one of my clients has the dog, and they always greet me when I walk in the door. The little dogs, right? So that one of the reasons they do that, one of the reasons that nursing homes have cats there is because it really does reduce their blood pressure. It helps calm people down, and there's a lot of benefits to those loving animals that we have. Some people like to journal, write things out. I've been surprised at how many times I'm really frustrated with things for days at a time, and I take my pen to paper, not typing, but actual pen to paper. Scientifically, there's something that happens when we put a pen to paper, and I'll get the answer. It's amazing, or I'll feel better. So some people like to do that. There's meditating, which is simply really taking some deep breathing and getting the rest of your thoughts out of your head, playing some classical music or music without words, and talking to a friend, venting. Now, I want to be cautious here because sometimes when we talk to that friend, they get us all wound up again, right? So sometimes you need to choose your friends wisely and make sure that they are helping you truly manage those emotions and not get you all stirred up again. Okay, so we have self-awareness and we have some self-management that we're able to use for ourselves. Now remember, Brené Brown says, I'll remind you, who you are is how you lead. Stephen Covey Jr. in his book Speed of Trust says this. He says, we judge ourselves by our intentions. We judge others by their behavior. We judge ourselves by our intentions. We judge others by their behavior. So I can say, well, yeah, I meant to send my sister her birthday present last week. I had a good intention, but it's still sitting on my countertop. It still hasn't gotten in the mail. How does my sister feel about that? She doesn't know. She just knows that she thinks that I forgot her birthday. One little text isn't really going to be good enough for her. She's judging me based on my behavior. She has no idea that I hope she knows that I love her dearly, but she has no idea that I have this really cool present that I think she's going to love because it reminds me of her dog, and it's still sitting on my kitchen counter, right? So we judge ourselves by our intention. We judge others based on their behavior. So I want to take that and ask you to flip it. What is your behavior as a leader telling other people about you? What is their perspective of you as a leader based on your behavior? Because that's all they have to go on. So consider that as you're thinking about your self-management tools, becoming aware of who you are, self-awareness, and then that self-management. Okay, so we're looking at self-awareness, self-management, and now we want to talk about other people. So we understand who we are, and we're able to kind of manage ourselves a little bit. Now we can extend awareness to other people. So let me ask you this. Use one word to describe this woman. What word would you use? Closed. What else? Serious. Sorry? Guarded. Yeah. She has a very serious look on her face, doesn't she? Okay, what about this fellow? How would you describe him? Pensive. Sad. Sometimes I get... Typical. Oh, because of the age? Sure, yeah, that teenager, yeah, right? Yeah, sure. And this is okay. We're being aware of others by their body language, right? So yeah, typical. That's the impression that we get. I've heard depressed too. What about this person? Cold, silly, happy. Yep. All right, last one. What about her? Confident, determined. Yeah. So take a look at these 4 individuals and notice they're all doing the same thing. They all have their arms crossed. Yet we described each one of these 4 people very differently, didn't we? And we all came up with our own little story about what that person was doing, whether they're being a typical teenager or whether they're getting ready to go on that sales call and they're going to kill it, right? Or whether they're being goofy and happy, but they're all doing the same thing. So often we say, the typical body language by Edith Wharton. I read it when I was in college. She says that when we have our arms crossed, that means that we are closed off, right? Nobody said, I don't think I heard anybody say any closed off for any one of these 4. Guarded was about as close as we got, right? So be aware of these unconscious associations we make about other people, whether it's simply their body language or whether it's a word that they say, you need to, right? Or whether it's maybe a trait that they do that is really annoying to you. I can't stand it when people are tapping their pens on the table when I'm trying to, have a meeting or something. So we all have those little triggers with us. Being socially aware of what other people are doing can be harmful sometimes, but it can also be beneficial. So we need to really be aware of what other people are saying because we have the body language is 55% of the power of our communication, our whole body, including our facial expressions. Tone of voice, we're talking about the power of our communication, how others perceive our communication. Tone of voice is 38% of the power of our communication. So if I were to come up here and stand like this and talk to you like this, it would mean a little bit different. Versus me being really engaging and using that inflection in my voice, right? So how are you coming across to other people? So those of you with mathematics in the room, you're thinking, wait, there's still 7%. What's the 7%? The power of our communication, 7% of the power of our communication are the words we use. That seems like such a small number. Now, when we're thinking about business and we're thinking about how we communicate with other people, what is the most common form of communication in business? Right? Email. Yeah, email, or sometimes texting, which is really laden with a lot of grammatical errors sometimes. So when we think about emailing and we're relying on that as a main power of communication, we're cutting out 55% of body language. We're cutting out 38% of tone of voice, unless you email in all caps, which means that you're shouting. But all that leaves us with is 7% of our communication power. And so think about when we're being socially aware of other people, and the only interaction you have with somebody is through email, or a majority of their interaction is through email. Think about all of the things that you're missing. You're missing out on 93% of what that person is trying to tell you. So be aware of some of the ways that you can lean in to those individuals as you are really building your skills on social awareness so that you can become a stronger leader. Now, I want to share a story with you about how powerful these unconscious associations can be, and those triggers and those initial gut reactions that we have, and especially when we speak them out loud. This woman is Jen Bethune. She is from my area of town, near Tampa, and she was on her way in 2011. She and her family were on their way to go see the mouse over in Orlando, to Disney World, when a drunk driver came all the way across I-4, ran into their car, and killed her 7-year-old son on their way to Disney World for his 7th birthday. 2018, she finally mustered the courage to go back to Disney World with her emotional support dog. She suffers from PTSD. She relives that moment where she watched her son die every day. And I'm sharing this with you from a blog that she's written. It's been national. You can look it up and you can find it online. So she was finally able to muster up the courage with the support of her emotional support animal to go back to Disney World. While she was at Disney World, here's what she heard. "Look, Daddy, an emotional support dog." Yeah, right. That's not an emotional support animal. And then the woman who said, "Well, looks like anybody can just put a harness on a dog these days and call it an emotional support animal." So thinking about the social awareness in this situation and the effect that those individuals had on this woman and how much of her story that they don't know. How are we doing this as leaders in our business, in our family, in our community? And how can we be more socially aware? The key is be open-minded and simply ask the questions. One of the things that I use for myself, my brain, is to say, what else could it be? So I'll come up with a gut reaction, because we all have them. I mean, sometimes those are the things that keep us safe. We come up with that gut judgment, that initial judgment, and then I stop and I ask myself, okay, what else could it be? I try to force myself to think of 3 things. And you know what? When I stop and ask the question, it usually turns out that none of the 3 things are actually correct. I had an individual at an office space, and she would roll, she kind of has we have a little bit of a weird dynamic between the two of us. I sense that she doesn't like me. I see when I walk in, she kind of rolls her eyes. So I'm like, how do I address this? Because it's nothing really outwardly terrible, but I still feel like there's a little bit of a communication issue that we could have. So I've talked to her, hey, I'd really like to talk about how we can communicate better. Oh, we're fine, we communicate fine. Well, one day, I walked into the cafeteria, and I said, "Hi, Sharon," and she looked at me, and she looked back down, completely ignored me. I'm like, all right, I've got to say something. So I go in a little bit later, I said, "Hey, knock, 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 do you have a second? Earlier today, when you were in the cafeteria, I walked in and I said hi to you, and you looked at me and you looked right away. You looked away. So I figure it could be one of 2 things. You're either enjoying your lunch in solitude, which I completely respect, you need a little downtime, or I've done something that has offended you or frustrated you. And if it's the latter, I'd really like to talk about it." You know what she said to me? She said, "Oh, that was you. Yeah, I'm getting cataract surgery next week, and I couldn't see who it was. And I couldn't even really hear you because it was really noisy. So I'm sorry that I didn't acknowledge you, but I really didn't see that it was you." So often we make up these stories in our head about other people when really it could be any number of things. So this is why I challenge each one of you when you're having an interaction with somebody, whether it's somebody that you work closely with, or if it's the cashier at the grocery store, or somebody you're sitting next to on the plane on the ride home. Challenge, if you have a judgment about somebody, notice it, and then challenge yourself to come up with 3 other things that it could be. And then, if you want, ask the question, "Hey, I noticed that you seem a little down today. I noticed that you don't quite seem yourself today. What's going on? How are things going for you?" All right, now, the reason that we're here for business, we're talking about connection and networking and really managing these relationships. Once we build that self-awareness, that self-management, the social awareness, now we get to being able to manage our relationships. Because in business, where business is full of people, we really need to be able to manage these relationships. So think about someone that you have a strong relationship with. So somebody in your life, any area of your life. Think about a person you have a really strong relationship with. You think that, yeah, this person, they are my person. It could be your spouse. It could be your business partner. It could be your child. It could be your best friend. Think about that person. Now, what makes that relationship so good? What makes that relationship so strong? What are some of the things in your relationship? Communication. That's the word of the day, right? Sorry. Vulnerability, yes. Being able to, and vulnerability requires trust amongst the other people. Which comes first, vulnerability or trust? I'm sorry. Vulnerability. You kind of have to have the vulnerability, but then you have to trust. It's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know. They almost are symbiotic. Okay, what else makes that relationship so good? Longevity. Yeah. Common values. Yep, you believe in the same thing. You value the same things. Unconditional acceptance. Yeah. Not just your good self, but also your quirky self. Yeah. And then the second part of that was the accountability, right? So having someone who will hold you accountable and tell you the things, those loving critics, tell you the things you might not want to hear, but you really need to. Yeah, Jen, the best thing about you is you're so nice. The worst thing about you is you're so nice, right? So sometimes we need them. Those are the relationships. The reason that we love these strong relationships, and the reason we're thinking about this person as a strong relationship is because these are the things that help us grow as people, right? These are the things that make us better people, make us better leaders. So I'm guessing as we're talking about this, communication, accountability, vulnerability, and for those of you who are thinking about your strong relationship, we're probably thinking that it really requires that communication, that two-way dialogue. It's not one person saying something to the other person. It's two-way. There's the vulnerability, there's the trust, and there's the accountability going both ways, right? So I'm going to give you some tips that you can use starting right now to enhance some of your relationships, either here, networking, or to even strengthen the strong relationships that you already have. The first one is really about not making assumptions. So often we make these judgments. I was talking about them earlier. We make these judgments. So go in with curiosity over judgment. The best way you can do this is to ask, don't tell. So before you go in, you tell somebody. We'll use the business environment. Before you tell somebody to do something, ask 3 questions first. So I call this the 3-ask challenge. And the beauty of asking 3 questions first is, first of all, you're gaining a lot of knowledge. You're learning. I've learned this the hard way. Sometimes I'll go in as a consultant. I'll say, well, you need to, see what I did there? You need to do this, you know, as a consultant telling people what to do. And they'll say, yeah, we've already tried that. Because I didn't do my due diligence and my research first. I have learned over the years to ask questions first to do my due diligence to find out what they have done. So the best questions are those that are open-ended. These are the ones that are empowering. The best questions start with what or how. So here's the difference between, do you like your job? Yes or no, right? Versus, what do you like about your job? What brings you here? What wakes you up every morning? What are you most looking forward to every day when you walk through the door? What keeps you here? How do you make a difference in your world? So those are questions that you're going to get a lot more information from versus those closed-ended questions. So whenever possible, start your questions with what or how. If you run out of questions and you can't think of anything, here's another tool you can use. I think of it as the TED Talk. So I think in acronyms, it helps me remember things. So TED stands for T, tell me more. Sometimes that's a great thing to say. If somebody comes to you and they're just venting, or they're coming to you with a problem that they want you to fix, and they stop, say, tell me more. E stands for explain that to me. So this is really helpful when we're talking about a process situation. I have this situation and we've gotten ourselves into a big mess. Okay, explain the process. What have you done so far to get here? Explain to me how you got here. So explain what we can do. And then D, which is perhaps my favorite, is define. So let me ask you this. If I say to you, well, if you say to me, I'll get back to you in a little bit, what do you mean? What's in a little bit mean? I don't want to talk to you about it right now. What's the time frame? What's in a little bit mean to you, like specifically? Sorry? When I'm ready, or never. Anyone else? You say in a little bit, what do you mean? Today? Now? Or within an hour, when I get a chance? Yeah, so when I ask this question to crowds of people, I usually get answers from anywhere from 15 minutes to, I hope you forget that you ever asked me because I really don't want to do that thing, right? So if we can define what we're talking about, then that can really alleviate a lot of unclear expectations. So unclear expectations are the number one cause of stress. So we're really, the clearer we are, the better off we are. So we're asking, we are not telling people. Challenge yourselves to the 3 asks. Okay, the next one, we're talking about building relationships, managing relationships, and maintaining these strong relationships. And so there's the asking piece, so asking over telling. And then there's also, once people do tell you, there's the acknowledging and the validating piece. So when we're validating and acknowledging and validating what people are talking about, what people are saying to us, what we're doing is we're just letting them know that we hear them and that they are valued. So we can do this by empathic listening. So how many of you heard of active listening? What active listening is pretty common, right? Hear of active listening. So empathic listening is active listening on steroids. Empathic listening, so active listening, let me back up. Active listening is really being present, right? Listening with 2 ears and 1 mouth, not trying to just wait until they take a breath so we can jump in and start talking, right? Active listening is being present and really having a dialogue. Empathic listening is listening to what's not being said. Empathic listening is really taking in the person, looking at their body language, looking at their facial expressions, listening to their tone of voice, and really trusting your gut to tell you what the other person is really saying. You know those people. When you go in, you say, hey, how's your day? Oh, it's fine. Right? Is it really fine? It doesn't look like it's fine. I noticed you looked away. Tell me what's going on. Oh, do you have a minute? You want to come and sit down? And again, you have teenage children, you know that you get this a lot. My son, what was the best part about school today? Lunch. So listening to what people are not saying, and using your intuition or your gut, paying attention to their body language, their tone of voice, and really digging in to be there for them. That can be the difference. That can be the difference between a generic relationship and a strong relationship. When you're listening to another individual, you can paraphrase. You can show that you're listening by paraphrasing what they're saying. It doesn't mean repeating word for word. It's paraphrasing what they're saying. It's saying it in your own words. Oftentimes when I do this, when I'm coaching individuals, I'll paraphrase. I'll say, so just to clarify, it kind of goes into the next point. Just to clarify, what I hear you saying is da 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 da. And I'm telling you, 50% of the time, they'll say, no, actually, I'm not really saying that. What I'm really saying is this. So there's a way of mirroring back to people so that you can share what you're hearing and replay it back to them so they can say, well, yeah, that's exactly it. You totally get me. Or, yeah, actually, that's not what I'm trying to say at all. I'm trying to say this other thing. So that can be a really powerful way to acknowledge and validate what they're talking about. A lot of times when we're acknowledging and validating, we want to say, oh yeah, somebody comes in and complains to you, for example. Oh yeah, of course, I completely understand that. Yes, I would be mad too. That is agreeing with them. What we want to do as leaders is not to necessarily agree with them, but still give them a safe space to vent or to coach them towards finding their own answer. Acknowledging and validating instead sounds like, of course you're frustrated that you didn't get that job when you feel like you've worked so hard for all of these years, when you didn't get that promotion. Of course you're frustrated. Anyone in that position would feel that way. So you're not saying, I agree with you. You're saying, if that's how you feel, of course, if that's what you think, if that's your experience, if that's what you feel, then of course you're going to feel frustrated by that. So now they feel validated. The beauty and benefit of feeling that validation and acknowledgement is so now they're like, oh, their defenses go down, and now their ears are open and they're willing to listen to you just a little bit more because you understand me, because I've been vulnerable with you. So now you understand me. So now, since you understand me, I'm ready to listen to you. So building on that two-way dialogue. And then sometimes we have situations where we really need to do a little bit of research and wait for the emotions to get to the rational piece of our brain. And sometimes when that happens, the simplest thing to do is say, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'm going to look into it, and I will get back to you tomorrow. And make sure that you do that, because that's what builds the trust and the accountability and the follow-up. So saying thank you. So once we are able to really validate and acknowledge people, we're going to build those relationships because they feel like they're valued, no matter where they are in the organization. So I've shared with you some tools that you can use as leaders, and leaders of your businesses, of your families, of your communities. And I like to think of it as when all we have is a hammer, everything we see is a nail. Okay, we've heard this before. But when we're able to build the tools in our toolbox, now we are better equipped as leaders to manage different situations in a much more effective way. And that emotional intelligence is one of these tools that you can build on as a leader to really boost that up. Okay, my name is Jennifer Kearns. Thank you for investing in yourselves to be stronger leaders. Get real, be great. Thank you.